Welcome to Your Next Mission podcast with the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army and co-founder of the American Freedom Foundation, Jack L. Tilley. Proudly presented by Cavalry Agency, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue University Global, and Veterans United Home Loans.
Hello out there, warriors, past and present, and your families, and thank you for serving our great country. Welcome to Season 3 of Your Next Mission video podcast, a program initiative of the American Freedom Foundation. I'm Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army. I always got to throw that in, and your host. I personally want to thank our presenting sponsors, Cavalry Agency, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue University Global, and Veterans United Home Loans for making Your Next Mission happen. They love our veterans and families, and I always say we love them too. We have a great show for you today. In fact, we have a wonderful show for you today. We're going to focusing on veterans in hospice, and I'm excited to introduce Claude Schmid. I don't want to make sure I don't mess that up. Retired Colonel, U.S. Army, Chairman of Veterans Last Patrol. Sir, so good to have you on the podcast.
Sergeant Major, distinct pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, not a problem. Sir, I'm sure the audience wants to hear everything about the last patrol, but before we do that, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a retired Army Colonel. I served 31 years in the Army, loved every minute of it, wished I could go back, and I miss it. I want to keep giving back to veterans, which is one of the reasons we're doing this nonprofit.
There you go. Well, you know, it's funny you say that because you spent 31, I spent 36, so I tell everybody that spent less time than me, I call them quitters.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well.
That's a long time.
We all serve what we can.
That's for sure. Sir, please tell us about Veterans Last Patrol. You know, how did it get started and what's your mission?
Well, we started about 3 years ago. Our mission is what we call the last patrol of a veteran's life. And basically that's end of care. We are a volunteer organization. We seek volunteers to help us reach out to and support veterans on their last patrol. As veterans, we all know about patrolling, air, sea, and land patrol. And the way we look at it, if a veteran's in end-of-life care, that's their last patrol. And our mission is to try to bring them friendships, honors, and support on that last chapter of life.
This is, that's really some amazing work, that's for sure. How does a process work in finding a veteran for hospice and assigning a veteran to visit somebody there?
Well, basically, hospice is a very large operation around the country. Anywhere you go, there's hospice care taking place, and anywhere in this country, there will be veterans that are living and retiring and then eventually dying. Hospice is pretty much an end-of-life medical process. So when somebody reaches a state of care in their latter part of their lives and they're not going to be able to live too much longer, there are companies that are hospice care providers. They're working with nursing homes, they're working with private facilities. And we find those through our volunteer network and through the hospice network around the country. We're looking for those veterans because there are a lot of lonely veterans out there. And we want to make sure on the last patrol that those veterans have a fellow veteran nearby. That they're not alone, that they have a chance to talk about their service again. And we visit with them, we honor them, and we basically work with hospices around the country. Anywhere you are, we can work with you to do that last patrol for a veteran.
I would think that you have a lot of veterans that are homeless.
Well, unfortunately, that's actually one of the inspirations of our mission. You know, we've all heard these stories about someone that was homeless, maybe died without a family. Sometimes the word gets put out in the veterans community and you will hear veterans and friends of veterans will go to those funerals. And we were saying to ourselves, well, why can't we find these people before they pass away and try to honor them one more time and thank them and help them? So that's what we started to do, is network with hospices around the country, find out where these veterans are, and then we'll go visit them. We'll serve them and we'll try to bring them special assistance. And basically it's friendships. You know, veterans are all about camaraderie and teamwork, and that last patrol concept comes from that, is to try to help each other out all the way through your final chapter of life.
Yeah. You know, I was talking a little while ago, I'm going to talk about it at the end of the show. I had a friend of mine that worked with me in an assignment that I was with, and he called me on the phone one day. He says, "Hey, Sergeant Major, I have cancer." I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, I got to go to Walter Reed." And he went to Walter Reed, and I guess they opened him up and closed him back up, said there wasn't nothing they could do. So they brought him back home, and and they took him home really to pass away. And so I remember his wife calling me and says, how can you, I need certain things. And boy, I was right there. I tried to do all I can. And when I tell you that story because when I initially started off, everybody was there around him to help him out. But as he got closer to the end of his life, people started, I'm not saying they shied away. Maybe they felt uncomfortable. They didn't know what to say.
Right.
Or whatever. I mean, that's really just tough business to do. I mean, it's hard, especially if you know the person, I guess. And maybe it's a little bit easier if you don't know them. I don't know, but
it is a little easier if you don't know them, but it's still difficult, and that's one of the reasons why we have a hard time. The hospice community around the nation has a hard time getting volunteers because it's not that easy to do this type of volunteer work. But as veterans, you and I and the rest of the veterans community, we feel we owe something to each other. We're part of a brotherhood.
Yeah.
And when we get in a hard time like this, and there's hardly anything harder than facing your own death, we don't want to do that alone.
No.
So we're asking fellow veterans to get involved with this volunteer work. You can do it anywhere. It's really just lending an ear. A lot of times you go visit these veterans is more just listening.
Yeah.
You just listen. You let them tell their story one more time. And we also know that many veterans, they're not big talkers. They don't necessarily tell other people too much about their service or about their own experiences in the military. But what we find and our volunteers tell us is at the end of life, a veteran who's soon going to pass away, they often want to share their story one more time. And they often will enjoy sharing with a new friend maybe one more time. And it's just remarkable the bonds that you can make in these situations.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of military spouses? Do they get involved with the process too? Or?
Absolutely. It's a good question, Sergeant Major. We do get a lot of veteran spouses. We also get family members of veterans, sometimes surviving spouses, sometimes grandchildren. Maybe they have a particular loved one that really meant something to them, and understandably so, that served World War II or what have you. And they didn't themselves serve, but we look for volunteers of all kinds, not just veterans. A lot of times those people have a particular heart for veteran stories, and we're thrilled to have them join our team.
Yeah. Sir, what challenges do you face when dealing with veterans in hospice or at the end of life care? Is there a lot of challenges there for you?
Well, Sergeant Major, you hit the main one really, was just the difficulty of this type of work. Many people are cautious, understandably so, about going into a situation where there's going to be a death pretty soon. So, it takes a special person to do that. But we think, again, that the veterans community, because of our brotherhood, because of our connections, because of our mission and our understanding of the idea of patrolling, all patrols, air, sea, and land, are best done as part of a team. You don't want to patrol alone.
Yeah.
Same thing in death and the dying process. We can help these veterans as they're facing their end by just being there for them and listening to them and visiting and providing that companionship.
Yeah. My wife did that one time. She went to hospice. She volunteered, and the way they set it up was there was like a schedule. You'd stay there for 4 hours or whatever the time limit is, and she stayed for 4 hours, and she came back, and she said, "I can't do it anymore. I mean, I can't do that." And so, it was really tough for her. And so she tried to work through it, but I guess she just couldn't do it. And it's just hard. I would think that it would be easier if you didn't know the person again. But
it's easier if you don't know the person, but it's still going to be more difficult for some, and it's not something for everybody. But it's also, that's not the only thing we use volunteers for, and we can talk about some of our missions in a moment if you have an opportunity. Yeah. But it's we're looking for these patients too. So if you're out there and you hear about a case where somebody needs a friend, it may not be you. You may feel that's not right for you, but this is a person that was a Vietnam veteran or something, and they could really use somebody to talk to. We'll try to find somebody in that community that would be a good fit for them and might have something in common with them that they would spend some time to share together. And the average volunteer, by the way, is doing about an hour a week. So you visit your patient, your veteran patient, about an hour a week, and the families, by the way, of the dying veterans really appreciate it too, because then they see that the veterans community cares about each other up to the very end. And you may have never had anything in common with this person. He might be Korea, you might be Desert Storm, and yet you, as a veteran, you still got that bond. So you come back in and you show that to the family too. And they said, wow, These veterans, this young man didn't know my grandfather, and yet he comes in for just to be a volunteer, just spend some time with him. And it means a lot. It shows the power of that veteran bond.
We're talking with Colonel Retired Claude Schmid, Chairman of the Veterans Last Patrol, and you're watching Your Next Mission podcast with me, your host, Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major. And don't forget, if you're enjoying this discussion, I know this is, if you're listening, this is a hard talk. This is a hard thing to talk about. And we need to make sure that we're honest with each other and we help each other. But if you're enjoying this discussion, please like us, click on that button below and subscribe, because we're all part of a family. We need to help each other. And we need to, like the Colonel said, we're all part of a family. We're all part of a team. And this is tough business. But we can't forget about these critical things that go on, especially in the life, that we got to stick together. Sir, to continue our discussion, the veterans, you and your volunteers are in their final days of their lives. Isn't it hard for someone who doesn't know anything about them to connect? Isn't it hard for somebody, if I don't know you, it's hard for me to connect? I guess if I'm a Vietnam veteran and I'm talking to an Iraqi war veteran, one or the other, it's hard for those guys to connect.
Well, you always got this issue of that they don't know each other initially, but I believe veterans have a special way of making that connection. It doesn't matter whether you were Iraq, Afghanistan, World War II, you still remember wearing the uniform, you still remember the discipline required, the hardships that were needed. So you have a lot in common. Maybe you've been in the same parts of the world. There's always things in common, and just that camaraderie. And you have to get used to the person, but it's kind of the idea of service that powers them and empowers us. That we served together. Maybe it's 40 years, 50 years apart, but we still served. And now we want to come back and show you, the veterans in hospice care, that we still care about you and we honor your service even at this very late stage.
Yeah, I think they always bridge that gap of service. It doesn't matter if you're Vietnam or Iraq or whatever. It's really funny when I'm out talking to whomever, and even when I was on active duty, it didn't make a difference because we still have a lot in common. One of the things I was talking about, I wrote it down here a second ago. You just can't throw somebody in there. How do you certify somebody for this kind of work?
Well, basically, an interested volunteer would first start off by coming out to our webpage, typically, which is veteranlastpatrol.org. And you would go there and you'd fill out a contact tab. And then we reach out to you and talk a little bit more about the mission, what the expectations and needs are in your geographical area. And then what we'll do is we'll refer that veteran to a hospice that's in their community. So let's say somebody's in Los Angeles, for instance, we're going to seek out a hospice care provider for them in Los Angeles that has veteran patients, and then we'll connect them with that local hospice coordinator in Los Angeles, using that example. So hospices are, there's a lot of confidentiality in medical care, so it's difficult just to provide personal information, obviously, right up front, but we make that connection to the hospice provider, and pretty soon, once you're on board there, you can have an opportunity to visit someone.
Yeah. Are the families, a lot of the families, I guess, participate and get involved in what you're doing, right? I mean, you said that a minute ago.
Yeah, they do. I mean, the families of volunteers often get involved. They may come and help honor a veteran in hospice that might be in a nursing home or might be at their private home. By the way, about half of hospice care in the country right now is done in a private home. So somebody that's in that dying process often prefers to stay at home if they can. So the volunteers' family may be involved. We're looking for people, for instance, and also family members do a lot of this, is write cards of gratitude, because one of the things that the volunteer network brings to the patient are cards from Americans around the country that have written a card and just thanking the veteran one more time for his service. And as I said a moment ago, the family of the patients oftentimes are involved too. That's what's so powerful about this. They'll see the veterans community come back into the picture, even if their loved one had no involvement with veterans groups or anything for the last several decades. When they're in the dying process, it's remarkable. A lot of times the veteran patient will remember that his military service was one of the most important parts of his life. And even if he was disconnected from the veterans community for a long time, he likes it and wants to get involved with it again at the last stage of his life. And so the volunteers would come to those pictures and the families would see that. And that's what I'm saying, is that the families will oftentimes really appreciate what we're doing. And a lot of times an extra benefit is to volunteer, because they're military experience themselves many times. they can learn things about the dying veteran just because of the nature of maybe the military conversation that the family may not have realized. I remember I had a case one time where the gentleman had dementia. And even though he was difficult to communicate with, because I was there and I kind of knew the questions to ask, I was able to figure out that he'd actually been involved in some construction projects down in San Antonio for the military after World War II. And the family never knew that. And so it was a conversation that I was able to kind of get out of the discussion. And so the families appreciate it all around.
Yeah. So, I just listening to you talk and stuff, I'm sure that some of the people that you go visit the veteran probably come back a little depressed. Do you have counselors on your staff that help the people that volunteer as far as any kind of therapy they may need? Or
I think oftentimes the best counselor is another volunteer. We talk to each other, but believe it or not, most of the volunteers are actually getting motivated by these visits because they are so pleased that they were able to do something meaningful for a veteran who's on his last patrol. They like to hear the stories, especially a lot of them are, hearing things about history maybe they didn't realize about how they did their training in World War II or what Korea was like, 50 years ago. So there's an element there of, psychological reinforcement that we need to do. But basically, most people get motivated by these types of volunteer requirements. But it does take a person who's willing to do that.
Do most people stay for a long time helping you out? Are your volunteers, are they like short, like a year, 6 months or whatever? Or do they stay for as long as they can, 10 years, 5 years?
Most of them stay. I mean, we're a new nonprofit. We've only been doing this for 3 years, and we started it, because we learned that the hospice community is desperate for volunteers.
Yeah.
It's part of the process. And they're particularly interested in veteran volunteers because they know the importance of that veteran-to-veteran connection. So our mission basically is trying to motivate and recruit veterans to do this type of volunteering wherever you are around the country. Again, people will say, well, I'm not near a military base, so is there something for me to do? Or I don't have a VA in my town. Can I help? And their answer is absolutely. 97% of veteran medical care is done outside of the VA system and not part of military bases. So wherever you are, chances are there's a veteran pretty close to you that's in hospice care, and you can help them.
Yeah. Most of your volunteers are the younger or older or right in the middle there, I guess.
Actually, most of them are probably a little older.
Yeah.
Many of them are kind of reaching that latter stages of their own professional lives or lives. So I would say the average age is probably 50, 60. It's something that, if you're retired and you're looking for something to do and you want to give back to the veterans community and you feel like you've got a welcoming ear for, one of our fellow soldiers, airmen, seamen, you can do it wherever you are is my point. And it's a flexible schedule. If you are working still, you can only do it in the evenings and weekends. That's fine. If you're retired, of course, then you've got that flexibility.
Yeah. One last thing, we'll take a break. How often do you do? I mean, if somebody does helps a veteran that's passing away, there is it like once every 6 months, once every 90 days, or sure?
It's up to the volunteer really, but the average is about once a week. You'll visit about once a week, spend about an hour or so at the home with the veteran or in the nursing home with them. So that's roughly what the commitment is, about an hour a week. You need to be able to put that in it. Some people might do more. Some people might actually be visiting a couple of patients at the same time. But it's that's the average is about an hour a week.
Yeah. Well, and so you're like, it's like a shift work. I spend an hour, you spend an hour, somebody else spends an hour. Do you just rotate? So you constantly have somebody there with them?
Well, remember, most of these veterans that are in hospice care and on their last patrol, just like our ordinary citizens that are in hospice care, they're in a facility somewhere, so they have other people around them, or they're at a private home, and so they don't need constant visitors. And but it's when the volunteer is able to go, and we generally like to do it at least once a week for an hour. Sometimes it could be more. It really depends on the volunteer and the time they have available, and we'll figure out something good for them to do.
Yeah. Do you do it once a week? Do you do the hour once a week yourself?
Yes, I've been volunteering for the last 3 years myself, and it's just been an amazing experience. And I've got some great stories I can tell you. Just what you learn from these men and women that have served their nation in the past is remarkable. And just one quick story. One of my earliest cases, the gentleman was a World War II veteran. He was a landing craft operator going into Normandy. And when I met him, he was alone. You know, he lost his wife. He had his wife's urn next to him on the couch. So she was there, had a TV in front of him, small room, and it was just him by himself most of the day with his caregiver. And so I'd go see him and, have a conversation once a week, and we'd tell stories, and I'd listen to his stories. And one of his great stories I always remember is during the landing in D-Day, adjacent landing craft got shot up really bad, and some of their crew went into the water and were wounded. And this gentleman that I met, he dove into the water, pulled out one of his fellow Navy crew members from the adjacent land craft, saved his life, basically. And those two guys made a lifetime bond. And the gentleman he saved sent him a box of cigars for like 43 years every year on the anniversary of D-Day.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
You hear great stories like that.
Yeah, you just made me think of one right here. I was at the 50th anniversary of Normandy over there, and I went with, in fact, the president was there and a whole bunch of different people. And I was there, I had some free time because I was walking around on the beach down there, an incredible place. And when I was walking around, I seen a lone person sort of walking around, and I didn't know where they was from. So a GI, they want to talk to everybody. So I walked up, "Sir, how you doing?" He said, "Well, not too good." I said, "Well, geez, is there anything I can do?" He said, "No, not really." I said, "Well, what's wrong?" He said, "Well, I came on Normandy Beach. I was one of the people that landed on Normandy Beach." I said, "Well, geez, you're still alive. I mean, things are doing this." He says, "No, that's not the issue." He said, "To survive, I had to pull a body over me. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way to survive." And really, quite frankly, he felt guilty about that. He said, "I should have died here." And I said, I told him, I said, God has us, puts us on this earth to do what we're supposed to be doing. He has special jobs for all of us. And I said, God didn't want you to die that day, and what you did was correct. And so, even though I can never change the way that you feel, but you did what was right. You did what anybody else would have done. So that's that stuff. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're watching Your Next Mission video podcast.
You're watching Your Next Mission, proudly presented by the Cavalry Agency. They help brands dominate no matter their size. Ideas, strategy, action. This is Cavalry. Learn more at cavalry.com. Navy Federal Credit Union, the most trusted credit union owned by members of the military community, serving all branches of the armed forces and their families. Their members are the mission. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Purdue Global, providing affordable online education for hardworking adults. Learn more about a personalized, innovative, and world-class education at PurdueGlobal.edu. Veterans United Home Loans, the #1 VA lender for 5 straight years. If you're buying, they're funding your dreams. Learn more at VeteransUnited.com. Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack L. Tilley.
Welcome back. Before we get back to our discussion with Colonel Schmid, I want you to know that you can reach out to me directly. Tell us about your transition. Tell us what topics you'd like me to cover. You can call or text me at 844-424-1134, and I'll actually reach back out to you. Or you can send me an email at smatilley@yournextmission.org. Okay, let's pick it up where we left off. Sir, we're heading into our final segment with you today, and I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and I have enjoyed it a great deal. And we just really have a couple more questions. Can you tell us the various ways that you honor these veterans in hospice at end of the life care?
Yes, our Major, thanks again for that question, the opportunity here today. First of all, you can find out a lot about us on our website, which is veteranlastpatrol.org. We've got stories there. We've got newsletters that we've been publishing once a quarter. We've got a contact tab. We've got links to our social media. So that's how you can get started. And we really have a 3-part mission. It's friendships, honors, and support. So those 3 elements that we're trying to do for the veterans on their last patrol. And these veterans are all over the country. Hospices and nursing homes are in every community in America. and that's where they are. So wherever you live as a veteran, you can help us in those communities.
Yeah. Did you say they're in every state? There's an organization like you, or are you connected to every state?
We have right now volunteers in 23 states. Good question. Thanks for asking that. But wherever you may be, if you're listening to this podcast, watching this show, and you're interested in this mission, it doesn't matter where you are, chances are there's an opportunity for you to help there, because there are nursing homes all over America. Now, a lot of hospice care takes place in these nursing homes or home hospice care. So, people, wherever people are dying, which is everywhere, there's a need for hospice, and there's an opportunity for volunteering.
Yeah. How did you get involved with this? I mean, what led you down this path to doing this kind of work?
Well, the answer there is my last job on active duty. I was the chief of the Wounded Warrior Flight Program, which is the operation that evacuated our wounded from overseas. And I did that for about 3 years and got a chance to meet thousands of our nation's wounded and talking to them and hearing their stories. And it didn't take long for me to realize that no matter what somebody's adversity, they want you to know what happened to them. They want you to know their story. They need somebody to talk to. And so when I was retiring, I was looking around for things to do. And I remembered that my mom once, when I was a child, she decided to volunteer in hospice. And she would come home to the dinner table and tell me, my two brothers, what she learned from week to week as she was volunteering in hospice. And I was a little guy then, but when I was retiring from the Army, I said, well, I remember that. And I wonder what happens to veterans when they go into hospice. So I began to research it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I found out that it's a tough time for the veterans that are dying naturally. They're in a lot of adversity. I mean, what's more adverse than facing your own death? But also that there's a need for other veterans to get involved. There's an opportunity to volunteer, and these hospitals all over the country are looking for volunteers. And that's our mission, to try to help them find it.
There you go. So now you're going to love this question. Now, I understand you have a couple of major events that are coming up.
Yes.
Tell the audience a little bit about those.
I will. Thank you for the opportunity. So every year around the holiday season, we are collecting holiday cards, personalized cards from American citizens all over the country, even overseas, that would like to say thank you for your service one more time to veterans that are on their last patrol. This is very likely to be those veterans' last Christmas season. And if you want to say thank you to them again, you can send us a holiday card. And last year, we got holiday card packets out to 7,000 dying veterans around the country, all over the communities. This year, our goal is 10,000 veterans to try to get a card packet of a half dozen or so cards from different states, different organizations, school children, churches, businesses, military units. If you want to get involved in sending some gratitude to veterans that are about to face their last holiday season, that's called Operation Holiday Salute. And again, if you go to our website, veteranlastpatrol.org, there's an explanation there of how to get involved and how we need those cards, when we need them by. Simple act of kindness that can mean a lot to someone who's on their last patrol.
Yeah. I remember when I was deployed, I've been deployed a lot of places just like yourself. And I remember that card that came to me every once in a while. They give it to you and you read them from a young person or a soldier or a family member, whatever. It really does make you feel good. Sort of picks you up for the day, especially if you're having a rough day. How can somebody reach out to you and, maybe you give the website a minute, but donate or volunteer for this great work that you're doing?
Well, again, thank you for asking that question. That's very important. If you visit our website, veteranlastpatrol.org, a lot of information out there. So there is a donate tab out there if you want to contribute to our cause financially. We also have logo merchandise. So if you want a Last Patrol hat or a Last Patrol shirt like you're wearing here with our patch.
Looks good.
You can get that out there at the website under our merchandise page. There are old newsletters. We do a quarterly newsletter. They're out there. So send us an email, write to us at the website there, veteranlastpatrol.org. And as I said, we're on social media. We're posting stories almost daily on Facebook, Instagram, and the rest of them. And we like to advertise what our volunteers are doing, and it means a lot. So if you're looking for something to volunteer, spend some time, a couple hours every week or so, and you feel like you want to give back to your veterans community, those of your brothers that are on their last patrol, we need you.
If somebody donates to you, what do you use the money for? I mean, is there a cost that's associated with the burial or whatever?
We have a lot of needs for financial resources. We're pretty much an all-volunteer organization, but we have a lot of outreach going on. We have what we call honor ceremony kits, which include quilts, patriotic handcrafts, certificates. We mail those around the country for presentations to veterans that are in hospice care. The Operation Holiday Salute, I mentioned a minute ago, that national card campaign and the preparation for that and shipping of that, is thousands of dollars to do things like that. So we do look for financial support. It helps us reach more veterans.
Yeah. Sir, any final thoughts? Anything you want to share with the audience?
Well, just it's a volunteer organization. That's our weapon systems, our fellow volunteers, and whatever branch of service. Even if you weren't a veteran, like I said earlier, we look for anybody who has a special affinity to veterans and the duty and commitment they gave to our country. And we just want to make sure that you're not alone. We've been in this fight for a long time together as a nation. And I think by serving our fellow veterans today and showing that even through the last patrol, we're taking care of them, it's also a demonstration to the next generation. Those young people see out there that the veterans are going to take care of each other up into the end of life. Those young people are more likely to serve because they will recognize that's really a commitment and that we're going to stick together until the end.
Yeah, I was talking to a couple of young guys that's in the studio a few minutes ago, and we was talking about when you're that young, you never think it's ever going to be over. You think you're going to live forever. Right. But the real answer is that life goes on. People rotate through this life and go into another life, hopefully go to heaven. But sir, before we get off here, I just want to tell you from this old soldier, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it's something a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of people don't do anything about it. They just sort of let it work through this system. But you're doing God's work, and I just want to thank you for what you're doing because you're making a difference, making a big difference, and I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that, Sergeant Major. We hope that we are. We think that we are, and I believe the volunteers really get a lot out of this mission. And I don't know if anybody else really pursues this the same way we do. There are a lot of veterans nonprofits, and there's so much important work to be done out there. Yeah. But like you said, end-of-life care is something by and large, people don't really want to be part of too much. No. And, but as veterans, I think we owe it to each other. We were teammates when we were in uniform, and we should be teammates until the end.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Hooah!
Hooah!
That's right. Okay. Thanks to Colonel Retired Claude Schmid. I'm Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army. You've been watching Your Next Mission video podcast, and I've did a lot of podcasts. This is probably one of the most important. It's about the end of life. Anyway, it's something you can't shy away from, and certainly do something with it if you can. Thank you for watching today, and please visit our website on yournextmission.org and leave me a review. I always say, I hope it's a good review, but if it's not, I can take that too. You can also visit our partners there who can provide you with so many services that will assist you in your transition from the military. Also, visit our corporate partners who have so many jobs that are available for you. Please know we want to assist you any way we can. This is a tough subject, but please know we want to assist you any way we can, whether or not it's at the beginning or at the end. Please follow me on all my personal social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And if you've enjoyed our discussion with Colonel Schmid, please like us. Click on that subscribe button below. Don't forget, we want to hear from you. Please leave me a message or send me an email at 844-424-1134 or send me an email at smatilley@yournextmission.org. Thanks again to Colonel Schmid for being with us today. It was great having you on the podcast. And at the end of every show, I always want to have my final thoughts. And today, I told a story a minute ago about a good friend of mine that was passing away. And he had cancer. And I remember everybody going there and looking and talking to him and being very supportive. But as time went on, people started to shy away. They started to feel uncomfortable. They didn't want to necessarily go to his house because they didn't watch him. They didn't watch him pass away. But I did. I went I don't want to say it was every day. I think it was every day. Every day I went to his house, and I didn't spend a long time probably there. Hopefully I stayed an hour. I'm sure I stayed an hour. But I just sat there and listened. I listened to the things that he had to say. I laughed at a joke, even probably if it wasn't funny. But it's about loyalty. It's about God. It's about believing. It's about helping your fellow service member. It's about never, ever allow yourself to forget the kind of sacrifices our veterans make for us. You know, somebody told me, and I know now it's 1% of our country serve. Never forget, we're part of a family. And never forget, we need to help each other. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks to Cloudcast Media. Thanks to, of course, New Mind Studios. And, of course, our 4 presenting sponsors, Cavalry Agency, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue University Global, and Veterans United Home Loans. We appreciate all you do for our military. And as always, see you on the high ground. Hooah!
Hooah!
You've been listening to Your Next Mission, brought to you by the American Freedom Foundation. Learn more by visiting yournextmission.org.